Sorry.
God, our divine spirit, we ask you to send the Holy Spirit down to our city tonight to bless our city and all the residents. We ask you to grant peace to our city and our country and the universe. We ask you to grant everyone on our council the wisdom to make the right decisions for the highest good of our citizens. For this we are thankful. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call roll call, Ms. Fran.
Sir. Mayor Dale Masad.
Here.
Vice
Massive.
Mayor Terrence Rowe.
Here.
Councilwoman Nancy Britton.
Here.
Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell.
Here.
Councilman William Dittmer. Let the record show that Councilman Dittmer is not present. City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
And City Manager Vince Lupo.
Here.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the council minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. General public, do I have a list? Do we have a sign-in sheet here? You are good for some things, you know that? Thomas Brown.
3 minutes.
Click your clocks. We got a long meeting.
Thomas Brown, 7436 Candlelight Court. I hope you'll all find 10 minutes in the next 2 weeks to look at the paperwork I left you tonight. This morning, I walked to the cul-de-sac at the south end of Candlelight Court to check the lake level. It is a couple inches higher as a result of the recent rains. I was able to walk to the lake edge because part of the public easement that was granted by way of an agreement between the builder and a former mayor of the city of Fort Ritchie allows me to walk there. Because a more recent city Fort Ritchie administration permitted a resident to erect 2 fences across the public easement, I could not walk on the recorded public easement to my left. The city permitting department took the permit application that clearly showed that the resident wanted to erect a fence across the public easement, which would not be on the resident's property. It is not the responsibility of the permitting department to approve or deny the permit. That is the job of the city building official after reviewing the permit application. This is where the permit denial should have happened. When the city building official approved the issuing of the permit, I believe the city manager should have stopped it by citing city ordinance and the fact that you cannot erect a fence on property that you do not own. The building official did not do his job. The city manager did not oversee and correct his building official. The public was made to suffer, and still does, by being denied access to a perpetual public easement. Please take my suggestion to turn the fences 90 degrees at the property line and keep the fences on the resident's property. I and others want access to the public easement that was guaranteed us. Look at the notarized signatures on the 1979 agreement and do something to abide by the terms of that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thomas Smith.
Hi, Tom Smith. I'm at 49, is it working?
Yes.
4939 Zodiac Avenue in Holiday. But I'm about to be a restaurant owner in Port Ritchie at 8117 US Highway 19. Yeah, it's
Where is that?
bluish green building just south of Ridge Road, owned by George Contis, the roofer from
On
Tarpon.
the east side,
West side.
west side?
On the west side. Yeah, it used to have a little bar in there and a tattoo parlor. And a florist, okay.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm about to become we're a couple months away. He's actually working on the building and some things. And what I wanted to ask y'all is, there's an open piece of land next to it, and I've talked to the owner there. And I was thinking about when I have my grand opening of having an event and using that open property for the event, like getting on the circuit of a name act that plays in Disney on Friday, Saturday. I can get them on Sunday. I've got a connection to do that for like half the price for a grand opening, and maybe continuing on. The owner of the property said that he's game for anything that I could get done, and I just want to know if you all would be open for something like that, and I would go ahead and start doing the permits and stuff.
I don't think I can answer that. Would you like, Ms. Lubo? We're in the middle of a lot of event.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to get an approval. I mean, I would have to
Yeah.
submit a permit and all that, but if you weren't not open at all to it, I wouldn't want to waste my time. But if you would be slightly open to it, I would start working on putting a proposal together.
Before, if I may, Mayor,
Please.
before you do anything, I would suggest that you tomorrow get with the building department, sit down and talk with them, find out what you can and cannot do, and at that point in time, when you come to the next council meeting, we'd be more than happy to help work with you.
Okay, so the building department in this building?
Yes, sir, right next door.
Okay, I will do that tomorrow.
Welcome to our
Welcome to the
community.
city.
Thanks a lot.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes, I minister at 6652 Ridge Road, and I know that we have a busy night tonight, so I want to keep this as short as possible. But August 12th, basically from the end of July through about August 12th, Somebody Cares Pasco has a series of back-to-school events, giving away backpacks and supplies and things of that nature, which we're planning all that right now. Last year, we gave about 1,600 of them away. This year, we're going to be about 1,000 more than that, okay? So I just want to make you aware of that. There's going to be events going around. We'd love for the city to be involved in those. And specifically August 12th, we're holding a big back-to-school bash over at, off of Ridge and Congress by the Infinity's Gym's parking lot there.
Okay.
It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be huge. And so I want to lay down a challenge here tonight. I want to lay down a challenge, a 3-on-3 challenge between our fire department and our police department in Port Richey. We're going to drag out a basketball goal. There's going to be a lot of kids there, and I'd love to see these two fight it out. So the challenge is laid down.
The
So
fire department chief is gonna have to, I don't think you can get airborne anymore. But we accept the challenge.
all right. God bless you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
How about Liz and Chief have to set up the dunk tank for 30 days? We can get you the dunk tank.
Any others, Mr. Todd?
5113 Mallet Drive, Matthew Todd. Last week I seen something disturbing on Channel 10 News, fake news, and I want to address this. The credibility of our police chief and officer Jeffrey Cox. Jeffrey Cox has made 300 arrests, 4 complaints out of 300 arrests. Our police chief and our other police officer is being set up with a scam that's going on, and I know this with the facts. But I want to know, and I want to call the news reporter out, Mr. Fake News, is he going to report the story when the truth comes out, Mr. Ramsey? When the true truth comes out, are you going to come back here with your fake news and report to the 2 people that are not telling you
Should
the
be
truth?
right to the,
Thank you.
Anyone else? You're always good for a gavel, Matt.
Thank you. Truth needs to
Okay.
come out, sir.
We more than
Please. I
agree
want
with
him to come out.
Believe me.
I want him here
Enough
when
already.
the truth comes
I believe they're gonna be very upfront with what comes out, and I know it will. And Mr. DeCanio, Officer DeCanio,
If
has
I-
all
if I-
my faith.
If I may,
Enough,
every
Doc.
single one of you guys
No,
have
no,
cleaned this city
no, Matt.
up, and this is ridiculous.
Thank you.
This is ridiculous.
Matt. Okay, no more from the public. Okay, bring it to council. Anyone have any thoughts?
no, city manager, sir.
One?
You want to skip the city manager?
Oh, did I skip you?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, you skipped me.
Okay, we'll get to you. We never had that before.
Okay.
You've been elevated.
If I might, counsel, a couple of pieces of information that I'm sure you would like to hear. We expect the groundbreaking for Whiskey Joe's Restaurant this coming June the 19th. So that's a new operation. It'll be groundbreaking on June 19th. And we expect the groundbreaking for Walgreens to occur within the next 2 weeks. So we're moving forward at a pretty decent pace with respect to our new buildings, and not too far in the near future, you can see Hardee's coming up, and it's looking pretty good. I just wanted to get that out. And also, we've begun, as some of you already recognize, the resurfacing of Leo Kidd, finally underway. Just wanted to get that out, Mr. Mayor.
To the council, any thoughts, comments?
Well, I think that, obviously we've been in the news, and it's probably a good idea that we talk about this. Whether or not we believe our police department, whether or not we believe the news, I feel that we have to protect our police department and get to the truth. We have to protect any victims. So I suggest that we call the FDLE in and have our city manager do that.
Okay. Any comments?
Yes.
Ms.
I have
Brown?
no problem calling in the FDLE. I think it's a great idea, bring them in, because I don't think we've got anything to hide. I have read what the FDLE did the last time. I understand, though, that if we're going to bring them in, that we have to pay for the cost of the investigation. Is what I've been told. Is that true?
No,
No?
No,
They'll
ma'am.
come in there on their own, so it's not going to be of any expense to the city?
if I might, Mayor.
Please.
Councilwoman, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement can be asked to come in and do an investigation. It is up to them to decide whether or not the request meets their level or threshold to do an investigation. But generally, that is an investigation at no real cost to us, other than the time that's involved from our employees, et cetera, but no other real cost. Again, it would be up to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as to whether or not they would or would not accept the request. I'm not so sure that the facts, as you've read, would necessarily merit their investigation. However, I most certainly would, if council decides to make that request, I would speak with them about that. There are several other alternatives besides the FDLE, if you so choose. One of them, of course, would be the Sheriff's Department. Again, they would also have an option whether to accept or not to accept. There is an additional entity which is fully capable of doing that investigation, but I would not recommend them. Although I have absolute faith, confidence, and trust in our police department, I would not recommend them to do the investigation. There is another organization called the Florida Association of Police Chiefs. They certainly can also do that investigation. They have no axe to grind, they're totally impartial. But your first request, if you so choose, after your deliberations, would be, I would certainly contact FDLE, if that's your choice.
Okay.
Well, I've decided to take it on myself to do what I can to find out what's going on, so I'm making requests and records requests and asking questions that I feel that Channel 10 did not ask. And I felt they were negligent in not asking all the questions and confirming their information. And I am going to ask to get records and things like that to come up. My biggest question is how do they know what's missing from our HR files?
It's very interesting, isn't it?
And
Would you put that in the form of a motion for the city manager to contact the FDLE, and then it will be up to them as to take it?
do we need a motion for that?
Well, please.
If
just legally, any council member can, or any citizen can contact the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and give them information, and it's up to them whether they want to proceed with an investigation. Any individual or council member, obviously would mean more coming from a councilman could do it. There's no cost involved. You can also make a motion requesting the city manager do it, okay? And it would mean more to the FDLE when they got that request, and then once again, it would be up to them to decide whether they wanted to do a formal investigation.
So we need a motion for.
If you,
our
if
city
you'd
to
like
do
this
that?
council to request Mr. Lupo to do it, yes.
Yes. No, I
If you
think
want to do it
that's-
at that level.
Okay, I make a motion that Mr. Lupo request that the FDLE come in and start an investigation in regard to this Channel 10
Right. Whatever.
hearsay.
Okay.
Very
I'll
good.
second for discussion.
Okay. Discuss away. I think we should do this.
I take issue also, as Mr. Todd does, with reporting done by Noah Pransky and Channel 10 News. You've come to our city, you've maligned our police officers, our staff, and our integrity. I asked you a question in my email: are you fake news? In the past, I've had the privilege of working with many investigative reporters in my time on council. People who report the truth and take the time and the effort to arrive at a fair and an impartial story without slanted embellishment. You, sir, Mr. Pransky, should learn from these people.
Okay.
I have to
Nancy?
say, in my opinion, nobody can pass judgment until you have two sides of the story, and that's why the FDLE needs to come in. It doesn't matter to me even if it costs money. This is important. It needs to be done.
Okay, I agree with all that. And I've spoken with Mr. Lupo. We have basically FDLE. I think we're gonna pass that motion. We're discussing it. If they turn it down, I still think we need to wipe the slate clean and free Mr. DeCanio, who I have full faith in. So the other alternatives would be an internal investigation. I think
No.
that's not. Don't help me.
I'm sorry.
We have the Florida Chief of Police Association, which I think might be the best impartial. Pasco County Sheriff, and as I believe one of the officers on the report said, we could call the FBI. I really don't think that Mr. Putin will come here. So first, let's vote on the FDLA. Is a motion
You
to
wanna go
have
to the
Mr.
public?
Lupo write a letter to the FDLE asking for an investigation.
You want to go to the public on it?
Yes, we should. Would the public like to speak? Speaks.
Remind them,
Speak.
be nice.
3 minutes.
3 minutes and keep it, we've got a lot to accomplish.
Do I ever go over my 3 minutes? Sandra Spaldi, 8207 Old Post Road. Back and forth. What proof is shown on this story? Again, Port Richey's gonna look like a fool, and there's no proof behind it. Before we contact the FDLE or anything else, why doesn't this young man show us proof? Who gave him this story? For what reason was it put out there? We know nothing, and here we're jumping again. Don't jump, there's nothing behind this. There's no truth that has been brought forward. Are we gonna cower down to everybody that decides to write a story? Or are we gonna have him come up here and tell us where he got the information? If he doesn't wanna tell us, then you go to the FDLE. That's my opinion, thank you, I'll leave you
Well,
with
I
that.
believe whistleblower laws protect him from divulging his information. So, that said, we've crossed out internal and we've crossed out FBI. That leaves us, oh, I'm sorry. Please.
I'm Jerry Griffin, 7638 Deidre Circle. I've read all this, and I have a question to ask, and that being, why would the information that's missing from the records in City Hall be at the former police chief's residence? And it would seem to me that when the present police chief took over, and he claims that information was not in his office, but all of a sudden it's reported that it's missing, and this particular person comes up with the records. Now, I don't know, just from what I'm reading, it seems a little fishy.
Well, I got an answer to that question, which was that it was on his email, I believe, Mr. Prensky, and it is public record, so he could have requested it, which I don't think he did, but apparently he has a lot of files. I don't know the extent of which he has that we don't, and that's why we need this investigation. But, right.
I just wanted to ask the question.
I
Jenny
asked
kind of touched on it a little bit, and I just wanted to reiterate it.
I
Certainly
asked
the
the same
question needs to
question.
be answered, so thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Next, who? Mrs. Todd.
Kathy Todd, 5113 Mallet Drive, Port Richey. I too called Noah and asked, where'd you get this story from? We're not scared of FDLE. I, as a matter of fact, called FDLE when the whole last regime was so corrupt when I ran for mayor. So we know there's shredded paper that was back in there. FDLE admits they took out 2 bags of shredded paper, files and stuff. It's all old news. Why all of a sudden we got these good guys who are making arrests for counterfeit money and saved the city lots, the businesses, but we got these guys out here doing as hard as they can do, as good as they can do, and we still got somebody wanting to put their name in the mud. What I don't get is, if you realize we brought in some good people, we are getting rid of the bad. It takes time. But the sad part is, somebody wants to jump the gun and make these new people held accountable. That's not accurate. The old people that we got rid of was our problem. That's why we started new, with good, honest people. And your truth will come out. Nobody's scared. Thank you.
Okay. I love your passion. I'm glad you didn't let Matt do that. Anyone else? Back to council. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Record show it passed them unanimously. But I don't want to leave it at that, because if it is turned down by the FDLE, we want to clear this
Yes,
record.
let them
And
just go to whoever will take it and continue.
I would say it will just leave it to Mr. Lupo. If the FDLE turns it down,
I'll find another legal source other than
well,
our own.
no, I want this council to make that decision. You have 2 choices, the Pasco County Sheriff or the Florida Chief of Police Association, which I think personally, there's an unbiased group, which would be the Florida Police Chief Association, that we ought to go direct the second inquiry to, if necessary. If you don't agree, please go ahead.
I don't know for sure, but I suspect there'd be a charge for that.
Yes, there would be.
Well, as Nancy
If
said,
that's a factor, I'm just.
We need to-
as Nancy said, I don't think that this, that money is really an object. We'll
Not
have to
really.
do it.
Well, the people deserve transparency, absolute transparency, even though I believe this to be a wild goose chase at best, at least for our current administration. But I know some things were done improperly before, and that investigation will lead us to where it leads us. But
That's right.
I don't shun from my duty to investigate for the people, and I think this council's doing the right thing.
My biggest concern is also for any, I suppose there might have been some victims, and I have concerns for the victims that have come forward. Maybe if they've had a discrepancy with an officer or whatnot, and that may be what some of the things are written. I don't know for this for sure, but if there are victims, I feel that we need to do this is also to protect them.
Victims as in the police officers or?
Yes, let's say a police officer did something, Noah mentioned something about citizens or, you know, in the community. So,
Yeah.
you know, if they came forward and were upset by not doing anything, by going to the FDLE is the right thing to do because we have to protect them too.
It is. And I want to say this, Mr. Pransky said that there were officers disciplined for getting kickbacks from Tokay, and I have never read that. I think Jim and I read it, and if anybody knows where that is, I don't know. I didn't read it in the revised report that I did read, and that was pretty boring. But it was 6,000 pages, and if anybody, Mr. Pransky, if you would forward that to me in email, I would like to have that. So, that said, we are gonna go with the FDLE, a letter requesting it. If that does not happen, we're going, I guess I could just direct you to go to the Florida Police Chief Association. And if that doesn't happen, we got Pasco County Sheriff, but there's a lot of interaction, and I want it to be the most transparent that we can have, and I want Mr. DeCanio, Officer DeCanio, Chief DeCanio, to be exonerated.
Mr. Mayor, if I
please.
may, I certainly will do council's bidding. But I would like to remind council, and I would like to remind our citizens, that this is not about Chief DeCanio. This is not about Chief DeCanio. He happens to be named. This has to do with the previous police administration and their administration of files. Improper administration of files, I might add. But that, again, was not reported, along with many other items that were not reported. Sorry, but I'm a little passionate about this issue because I absolutely believe in the integrity, honesty of both Chief DeCanio and the current police department. Again, I will most assuredly follow your directions.
So I expect a letter to go out to the FDLE tomorrow, and we'll go and see where it goes, and I think you can all be assured that our department is clean now. Okay, any other?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure that you understand that I'm going to be doing my own investigation on the side because he came to my house, he said things to me that he stated as fact, and I'm going to find out if he has any validity behind him because I really doubt very seriously that he has any validity that wasn't illegally obtained. If there is a set of records out there that is not in the HR, then where have they been? Who has had them and what are they doing? I want to know. He did not ask those questions. So I find that his investigation lacking, and I don't think he's done his due diligence and fairness towards the people that are being victimized and now out in public for that. So I will be asking questions. I will be recording or requesting records and things like that in order to find out my investigation. I think he's missed out. I think he's missed out on the opportunity to prove one way or another. He is just passing on hearsay.
He will find the truth, and I'm gonna have faith in the media as opposed to Mr. Trump.
I can say I do not have faith in the media.
Well, I've had my share of
And my
slander.
only encounter with them up close and personal has just completely supported that.
Pull the records up of the old police chief.
Yeah, we're not gonna slander anybody here. We're gonna let this be seen, and it will be transparent, and we will be exonerated. Okay. Any other things, items you'd like to speak to while we're in council?
One other thing, I just wondered if, Vince, that you've done any more research on that cemetery we chatted about?
On,
The cemetery?
yes, I have. with respect to cemeteries, although basically, ma'am, they are basically profitable if run properly. The location we discussed is extremely low-lying, marsh. It would be a extreme effort to turn that into a cemetery, that area into a cemetery. But on the whole, cemeteries are an extremely profitable venture, and there are several different styles, kinds. There are above-ground facilities, which in fact that would have to be if we were even, would even entertain it. So I have not progressed further unless council directs me to, because I think
We
it's.
had asked you to research it and bring us some information back. I'm just following up on that.
I'll prepare a full report and give it back to council at the next meeting.
Okay, any other thoughts, other subjects?
Yes, I would like to address one more thing, and that is, I don't shy from the media, never have. They have their job, and I believe in transparency, as I said before. However, I also believe that the press should have some guidelines about boundaries. When they go to the mayor's house, when they go to a councilman's house, I'm sorry, that is breaking barriers. That is our private home. If you want to talk to us, and we do not want to meet you at City Hall, please do not invade our privacy. This is the type of reporting that I think is despicable, and you catch people off guard. I'm surprised Mr. Pransky still has his teeth, because most women caught without makeup and their hair done probably would not have seen the light of day after that. But that being said, I think Jenny showed great composure, and I ask that there is some consideration for, we are politicians, and we are at the beck and call of the public, and we do our best to answer that call. But please, this is the place for city business, not our homes.
Okay. And I would say to Mr. Pransky, I want to trust you, and I want to trust that this goes where it really goes. Not twisted words, just follow the trail, find the smoking gun, whoever it might be, and I don't think it's in this department. And thank you. We'll do one other thing. We have a city ordinance, no alcohol in public places.
Yes.
This year at the 4th of July at Waterfront Park, we don't have time to, we would have to pass an ordinance, and I don't know how you all feel about that, but having a beer on 4th of July and watching this wonderful display is, I think, worthy of being spoken about and addressed at the next, for the next special event. May it be Christmas, or, well, Christmas is not really a big beer drinking place, but celebrating the country is a different one. And we don't have to talk about that. I just like to have everyone roll it around their heads. Okay. We are now, we got rid of the city manager. Agenda, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I got rid of
Pete
that
Sachel.
one. Mr. Schatzel. How are you, Pete?
Good evening.
If you don't have good news, don't bring it.
No, I think I have a good report.
Very good report.
I'll try to try to hit the highlights. On the same token, if you have any questions as I go along, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. I believe you have a copy of the 4-page, or excuse me, the 5-page report that I will be covering.
Yes.
Oh,
The, I've been doing this for a number of years now with you, and I have stayed with the same format. I think it's helpful. I think there's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to go through all of the information, but as I said, I do want to hit the highlights. On the first page is a report on the general fund, and I apologize, the report is for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which is, for the 6 months ended March 31st, 2017. And for that 6-month period, looking at the general fund, the amount of actual revenues were, I'll use round numbers, the amount of revenues were almost $3 million, and the amount of the expenses were $2.3 million. So looking at the actual results, there was almost a $676,000 excess of revenues over expenditures. As I have cautioned you in the past, when you look at the actual results for the general fund, one of the things that does need to be considered is the fact that you get all of your ad valorem taxes really in the first few months of the year. And so what I have done in this presentation and also in the past presentations is to consider the ad valorem taxes as if they have been received pretty much pro rata throughout the year. It's almost like if you get all of your salary in the month of January, you'll look great if you do an income statement at the end of January. But you have to think of the fact that you are going to have to survive for another 11 months. So in looking at the general fund, if the ad valorem taxes are considered to come in over an even stream, the amount of revenues with that approach would be approximately $2.5 million, and the expenses about $2.1 million. So that still results in a $393,000 excess of revenues over expenditures. And I think that's an appropriate approach to be using. Just a couple of highlights in why you do have somewhat of a larger, the reason why you have an excess of revenues over expenditures. To put this in the proper context, when you adopted your budget for fiscal year 17, you had adopted a budget where you believed that you were going to have a deficit. The amount of that you had budgeted for your deficit was about $315,000. And what has changed that, seizing on some of the areas where you have a very favorable variance in your budgeted revenues compared to actual, is in looking at the building permits, for the first 6 months you had budgeted that you would have received about $50,000 of building permits, and in the first 6 months you have taken in $292,000. So there's about a $240,000 favorable variance. In looking at the red light camera revenues, for the first 6 months, you anticipated about $437,000 of revenues, and you have taken in $660,000 of revenues.
So we doubled almost?
Those two areas in particular are, where you have a very favorable variance.
Right.
It's not so much that you doubled, but you've taken in about $223,000 more in red light camera revenues than what you had anticipated.
I think we should understand that revenue will not last forever. So we have to Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Not to interrupt you, but as I constantly state, 2/3 of it has an associated increased expense against it.
Right, and
Okay, so it's not 223,000 in additional revenue. I assure you, take 2/3 of that figure, and you have increased expenses against it.
So you're talking 2/3 of that figure is what?
So you gotta take, if you're gonna look like we have that much additional money, put it in your brain, take 1/3 of it, you have that much additional money, because the other 2/3 is an additional associated cost with it.
Okay, so we don't have to, if we, when we lose it, I assume.
What
we
I'm
don't
saying
have as
is,
much.
I do address that.
I realize that, but from the mayor's comments, it sounds like, hey, someday we could lose 223. The answer is no, you'll lose 1/3 of that figure, if that's the
And
figure. Do
That's
you understand what I'm
better.
saying?
And I'm just saying that so when we get into the budget season, we realize.
Yeah, and the reason it's high is because I budgeted it low just in case. I mean, I was afraid it
That's
was
why I
going
picked you
away.
to budget.
No, the point I wanted to make is that
I'm sorry, Pete.
now, if you look at the total revenues, less the amounts that you pay to the state and less the amounts that you have to pay to have the cameras, the cameras being monitored, the overall income for the first 6 months was $242,000. So if you did not have the red light cameras, for the first 6 months, your net income would be down by $242,000. The next, I want to go to the CRA fund, and, in looking at the CRA fund, as opposed to the general fund, where you very much have almost all of those expenses are fixed and do have to be incurred. In the CRA fund, there are certain projects that you can budget, and those projects might not necessarily have taken place in the first 6 months. But just in looking at the snapshot in time for the first 6 months, the CRA fund took in $860,000, and the amount dispersed was $310,000. So there's an excess of revenue over expenses of $551,000 for the first 6 months. Again, when you look at the CRA fund, all of the revenue that goes into the CRA fund does pertain to ad valorem revenues. So if you looked at those ad valorem revenues coming in an even stream over the year, for the first 6 months, you would have an excess of revenues over expenses of about $119,000. So that $551,000 excess that I mentioned is somewhat misleading, because you really have to consider the fact that you've received all the ad valorem up front.
Okay.
In looking at the Penny for Pasco fund, the amount of revenue taken in for the first 6 months was $198,000, and the amount that was expended was $178,000. So there's a $20,000 excess of revenues over expenditures in the Penny for Pasco fund. I did want to note, in the Penny for Pasco fund, you had budgeted, at the outset of the year, you had budgeted a deficit of about $99,000 for fiscal year 17.
Oh, in expenditures.
The next fund is, I think, just as the general fund results are very important, the next fund I'm going to cover is the water and sewer fund. And again, for the first 6 months, there are positive results. The amount of revenues that were taken in the first 6 months total $1.66 million. The amount of expenditures were about $1.6 million. So there's in that fund, you have income of about almost $59,000. Again, to keep in mind, when when you did the budget, you had anticipated about a $41,000 deficit for fiscal year 17. So through the first 6 months, you're running at about a $79,000 favorable variance. In looking at the profitability of the water and sewer fund, that 58,000, it does reflect the fact that that you have taken asset depreciation. There's that number is for the first 6 months is about $200,000. What I attempt to do in giving you that number is to look at how it will appear in the annual audit. And so that 58, almost $59,000 income, is after asset depreciation.
Okay, now, as opposed, or compared to the year before, how is that number? Or how are these numbers in the water department? I'm expecting you're gonna say we're making progress. Don't put words in your mouth.
Just to give you an idea, for the fiscal year ended 2016, which you are about to receive, you will be getting the audit report. There was about $142,000 profit in the water and sewer fund. So what you're showing now is pretty much in line with what you had done in 2016. In looking at the revenues, the revenues for the first 6 months were, as I mentioned, $1,666,000. For all of 16, the revenues were the amount was $3,254,000. So you're very close. If you compare 17, compare that with 2016.
What if, no, 16 when we started?
End of 16.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking you for the 2015. Has this turned around pretty dramatically with the amount of water we purchase versus the previous years?
Well, in regards to the amount of purchased water, I make a note here that for the first 6 months, you're about $72,000 under budget.
Under budget.
For the amount of purchased water.
Right.
So.
Okay, and we.
So that's a very favorable variance.
It's gonna get better.
All right. The last fund that I was going to comment on it has to do with the stormwater fund, and that's not as it doesn't have the volume that you have in the water and sewer fund, needless to say. But for the first 6 months, there's about a $30,000 loss in the stormwater utility fund. The amount that you've taken in revenues is very much in line with what you had budgeted. For the first 6 months, the amount that has been expended is about $91,000. But a part of the reason why there's a loss in that fund is that you had a project basically having to do with mangrove trimming, and all of that project was done in the first 6 months. So in looking at my 6-month analysis, you've incurred all the expenses, but what that means is that there's about $11,000 that you still have left in that budget item. So what I'm saying is that I don't believe you're on course to lose $60,000 in 2017. But I just have a few more highlights, and I'll be through here.
Yes, sir.
The fourth page of my report, I list out all of the cash accounts, and again, I'm just going to hit the highlights. As of March 31st, the total amount of cash on deposit in all of the city's accounts totaled $6.3 million. Of that $6.3 million, about $2.1 million of that cannot be spent on operations. It has to be spent on things like transportation impact and having to make improvements to the water and sewer infrastructure. But if you look at the city's unrestricted cash balance at the end of March, that amount is almost $4.2 million.
Restricted cash.
Just to give you an idea, though, I did a presentation just like this that we did as of June 30th, 16, and at that point in time, you had about $3.4 million of unrestricted cash. And now at the end of March 17, it's almost $4.2 million.
Last year, that's now.
And my last comments, what I've been talking about so far, or just what I just spoke about, has to do with your cash balances. But in looking at your fund balances, on the fifth page of my report here, which is page E, excuse me, fifth page, and
Say D or E?
E, yes.
E.
And what I wanted to point out to you is that for the general fund, the total fund balance as of March 31st is about $2.46 million. And of that $2,460,000, the amount of the general fund balance that is not, that is basically unrestricted, totals about $1.5 million. If you look at, if you go back 6 months, that dollar amount was about $1.1 million. So you've had very favorable growth in the first 6 months. It's not guaranteed that it's going to continue for the next 6 months. And the other important item is, has to do with the unrestricted fund balance in the water and sewer fund. And as of March 31st, that balance is $972,000. And in the past 6 months, that has increased about $260,000. So, as you can tell from my comments, that the first 6 months, I think it is a very favorable report. And looking at the expenditures compared to budget, I think you, in the general fund and the water and sewer fund, you're very much staying within budget. So I didn't see anything that I felt like I needed to report to you that I felt alarmed about, or something that you would be alarmed about.
Would you say that as an entity, we're going up?
Yes.
So it would merit a raise for the mayor?
I don't think I have the authority to.
Not that far. I think Mr. Lupo and Mr. Mathis. Yes, please.
Apologize, Mr. Schatz, but I only got this an hour ago, so I haven't had a chance to review it. I just wanted to make a comment on the CRA budget. As Mr. Schatz explains, that comes from ad valorem. You get it at the beginning of the year, so it's not as great a number as it looks like, because nothing more is coming in, but we will be spending. But just for council's edification, you'll be spending over $100,000 about 10 minutes from now.
Correct.
And you'll also be spending probably a couple of $100,000 more, if not three. Those monies were set aside in that budget. So in the CRA budget, it's not like you're gonna have 600,000 left over or whatever. What you're gonna be spending is budgeted for. But with regard to the 1.5 million on unrestricted reserves, and correct me, Mr. Schatchville, if I make a mistake, in a very broad sense, that's the kind of figure we were talking about against the $5 to $5.5 million. How much should you have, right? Whether it be 3 to 6 months operating expenses. Generally, your revenue's close to your expenses. Used to be 1.1, now we're at 1.5. We're getting into that. We stopped the bleeding. We're
Right.
kind of where we wanted to go, and now it's starting to go in the other direction very slowly. So that's kind of the number. How much reserves do you really need? Is that a fair statement, Mr. Schatz?
Yes.
We discussed that at length,
Yeah, I
I
just
think.
wanted to,
and
the only reason
we
I
were
commented on that
kinda
is
at
because
the
I set this
bottom
budget, and
of
it's nice to see it. It's happening. Yeah, kind of got as far as we really need to go. Now, how much more you want or what you can do is.
And,
We need to prepare for, like, if we have a flood.
Or red light
absolutely.
cameras going away.
well, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying
We need a lot of money put back for that, should something happen, because it'll cost the city a lot of money.
I think there's a very good, if I might, Mayor, I think there's a very good possibility with this coming budget that we can set aside an amount. But of course, we'll be putting that budget together and we'll see exactly where we stand, and council will have those options. But there are very specific issues like that
Yeah.
where we should start to prepare for them. We are, in my opinion, and I believe from what you've just read and heard, the city's beginning to turn a corner with respect to income and expenses. And we are basically a very conservative community, and this administration is basically conservative, and I believe that's the will of council, being fiscally conservative. And we are making headways 1 inch at a time, and we'll continue down that path.
Excuse me, Vince, what did the storm in '93 do to the city of Port Richey financially? Do you recall?
93, I got here in 96. In
But I
90,
mean, it'd be a good idea, maybe to see if we have any records, just to find out
We
what
were-
what did that flood set us back? What happened to the city financially during that time? So we would get an idea of what to expect.
Sure. We can easily look up the records.
Right.
They're just simply a matter of pulling up the revenue reports.
There's another issue I'd like to address. I know the county talked about it the other day at a meeting. And that is the homestead exemption change that's probably going to be voted in. The county is going to take an $8 million hit, if I heard that number correctly. And I think that's something we're going to have to look at in this city as well, because everyone's going to be affected by it to some extent.
Yes, Vice Mayor, you are 100% correct. In fact, that's one of the issues that we've been looking at.
Yeah.
We've already requested from the county numbers that we can utilize during our budget process. And that's part of the issues that we'll take in consideration. So we're right on top of that. We're right on top of that. It's a critical issue for us during our budget process. And we'll be coming right back here. And that's another reason why we need, we need to continue down a path of restricted expenditures and increased income to possibly offset an event like that or a catastrophic event that you're talking
Well,
about.
that would be, what Terry's talking about would be the 2006.
Yes, that was gonna be my comment. That's exactly correct. The
We're
vote on that hasn't come up yet, and that would not be in the next budget, but the budget after.
Following budget,
But Hillsborough
18.
County's already planning for it, because their numbers are tremendous. I've already discussed with Erin, see if we can get some preliminary figures. How much it'd be to us, I don't know, but just keep in mind, what it means is, it means that your tax base kind of changes. It makes your rollback rate go up. So in other words, it doesn't raise people's taxes, okay? It means that to raise the same amount of money, you'll need to have a higher millage rate. That certain people will pay more and others will pay less, depending where you are in that. So it's a hard thing to do, but we're trying to get some numbers, Councilman, so.
Right.
Is this gonna affect people that, are part of the, what was?
PACE program?
No, not the PACE program, the, where you, if you're in your house a certain amount of time, you can take the tax base with you. Save your homes, yeah.
Save your home.
Very possibly. I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't think it changes the save our homes. If you're still behind, it can't go up a certain
Right.
percentage. I don't think it's gonna change that. What this does is increase your homestead exemption another $25,000.
Right.
which is gonna take X amount out of
So
our.
it's
Well,
gonna
where it
reduce
really hurts is
revenues.
when you have a house worth in the lower end that's paying a little bit of taxes, now won't pay
They
any.
pay none at all.
Yeah.
And
So
so
that's-
it
and
it
that's
puts a
in
burden on the higher
2006.
expensive homes.
Is there a way to predict in some
The ca-
We're asking, we're trying to get figures.
Figures from the county.
We're asking, Aaron and I have tried, but, I mean, Hillsborough got the figures somehow, so we called over to the appraisal. So if we
Well,
have to crunch them ourselves.
The other mitigation part of that, I think, is that I'm working with Mariano, I think Mr. Rowe is as well, Amber and Jack, to do some preemptive strikes and making our drainage better, Chris. We talked about some of that stuff. All of the ditches were not done when we were told they were all done. And they need to get done, and the more we can invest in that infrastructure, I think the more we'll find a flood not being crippling or as crippling. And I want us to go forward on that.
You know, just real quick on the flood, I was at the mobile home park. That whole stream beside their property is just full of crap. That needs to be dug out. They could even possibly do their retention pond deeper to help out the situation.
Nancy, I'll just tell you, that's private property, first of all, so we don't
Right,
have
I know
much to
we
say
can't do
about
it.
it.
I'm just suggesting.
But I will tell you, the major answer for them, and I've told the county this, and they're gonna do $40 million engineering study
We
of
had
some
somebody
sort.
from the state down here, I know.
Yeah. Ridge Road drainage from the trailer parks under Ridge Road out and eventually to Salt Springs, it is restricted. There's a bottleneck there and it needs to be jacked and bored. And I don't know, Michelle Baker, she's gone now, told me they had an 8-foot output. No, they don't. I went center of measurement. I forget what it was, but that ain't 8 foot. And, excuse my language, that's not 8 feet. What's that? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna run this meeting. Okay, so what I'm saying, you're right, Nancy, and I think we can lessen the blow by being proactive. And eventually, maybe the county engineers will figure that part out. But all of our swales for all of the citizens need to be dug out, and they're, just gonna put that on you, Chris. I'm sorry, Mr. Schatzel, I've been touched by the light.
I don't have any further comments.
Well, thank you for coming. I like your news.
We've got an excess.
Again,
You can
thank you
bill us
very
for
much,
some
Mr. Sanchez.
Shoals Arch supports. Miss Sandy.
Well, we thought that might run into more questions for you, so, we didn't want you to go.
Oh, I do have a question, I guess, for the council. I look at this grant. We hired a grant guy. Is he still on board or what?
Pardon?
The guy that got
Mr.
hired
Fox.
for,
Mr. Fox is still on board.
is he,
He still does
where is he?
research.
Where do we see him? Do you get reports?
Well, he hasn't really filed for, he has not filed for any grants that I'm aware of at this stage, so we're not paying him anything. His is a contingency operation. That was a contract that was passed by this council, not this council, but by one of our councils, with a contract with the gentleman, and he does grants on a percentage basis. He has not been working towards that end now, so we're not paying him anything.
Well, is there anything in his contract that says we need him?
No, we don't have to use him.
But I don't see us going out for anything.
If we can relieve Mr. Schatzel, I would
Oh,
like to
yes,
go into detail.
you may be gone.
We
Thank
have
you
the other
again.
report.
Oh, we got another
always good to
report.
see
Keep
you
your
on that.
feet under you there.
Mayor, I requested documents on that because I had some questions. And staff was great. They gave me something this deep, and I went through every page of it. And I still haven't got all of my answers on that yet, but what I'm not seeing in there is a contract over Restore Act funds. There's a lot of action in there, records, requests, all kinds of documentation over FEDRA funds, but there is really nothing that says Restore Act funds on it. So I'm going to ask staff at this time is if there is anything, because I think this is going to be important. I remember when I fought this, and the council came up here and voted to create a contract with them, but I do not see that contract. And I've talked to the county about this, and we need to see a contract. If we're going to pay this man, and those funds are going to probably be coming through very shortly, I believe. I think they are finishing up the last few little items on it, and I expect some of those monies will be coming to the county for distribution, which raises another question, are we ready for that? Because we've got to pay along with it. And I hope we have everything together on that, because
You'll have that answered in the next meeting, I think.
the other thing is they are very, very firm about the fact that we are going to follow every letter of every parcel of the law. So they're probably going to want some people from our staff to go and take the courses that they have taken to learn how to proceed, how to monitor, how to do all the paperwork and everything else, because it's that critical. And so with that in mind, I think we probably need to move ahead with some of that, just planning stages, make sure we have our act together so we can move forward as soon as those monies come through.
Well, what I recall, and I wasn't on that council, is that Mr. Chamberlain told us we didn't need him. I never understood why we had him, because the funds were the funds were coming and are still were coming. You have more faith than I do. I hope they are. If we don't have a contract, I don't want to pay anybody for something that was coming through and put his name on it. So,
There are contracts, Mayor, in that file, but I
Is there
do
a
not see
contract to
Restore
pay a
Act.
grant writer for
The Restore
something
Act
he didn't write?
is not written in it. And it talks about things that have to do with what we're doing in Restore Act, but it's not written as a Restore Act contract.
I'm not sure I understand what we're talking about.
You know what, I'll give you that whole packet,
Yeah,
Mr.
are
Math-
you referring, the
Mathau.
Restore Act money hasn't been approved yet by the Treasury.
Right.
Well, I understand, it's been this way for a year and a half now. So what contract are you referring to? The one that the interlocal, they're gonna have a sign and all the restrictions in there? Because I've seen that.
No.
The council back 2 years ago met on a Saturday, and Curtis Franklin was here, and it was at that time that they decided that they were going to hire the Fox.
Oh, I didn't realize this.
Yeah, and they were going to let him take care of the application processes. There should have been a
Application process
contract on
for
that,
what?
and I don't see it. That's what
But
I'm looking
if
for.
I'm not
The application process for what?
for the Restore,
To apply for,
Oh, the Restore Act? Okay.
So, if I may,
yes,
evidently, a city council several years ago entertained, I believe it's a Mr. Fox, to do grant writing and research on a percentage basis. That council approved it. He did in fact do several applications. What the vice mayor is talking about is those specific contracts don't speak to the Restore Act. And that's what he's questioning right now, is whether or
I'll
not
check that out.
Mr. Fox should or should not be paid.
Oh, okay, I'll check that out. I
So-
didn't realize
Yeah, 'cause
that.
there's,
I don't like paying anybody.
there's a sizable amount of money, and he has contacted Mr. Franklin to ask, how soon he would get paid. And the question remains is, if we don't have a contract, I have questions.
Oh, I'll check that out. Yeah.
well, I have questions if we do, because from my standpoint, the Restore Act funds were coming through. Now, I don't know what, I've never read in any of the documents leading to what we got, anything about Mr. Fox or whether he participated in any way.
First I've heard it, but I'll check it out.
No, okay, so that would end up being, what is it, 10%?
No, it was 3% up to a
It's a
certain
varying
amount, then down
percent
to
depending
2%,
upon.
and then
yeah,
down to 1%.
It's a varying
if I
percent
remember
depending
right.
upon the amount of the grant.
What I do remember, Jim, is that Curtis Franklin said we don't need a grant writer, it's already done. And what happened after that is.
There's-
Jocelyn, do you have
there's
any
quite a bit- We
recollection
have
of
quite
that?
a bit, there's quite a bit of information we prepared, and we're more than happy to give it to the city attorney for his perusal.
Okay, but when you say we've repaired, we're not talking about Mr. Fox.
Concerning Mr. Fox and the contracts.
Okay.
It was a specific request from the vice mayor.
Okay. Oh, okay, you did this previously?
Yes, he requested it.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, staff. I know that was a lot of work. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
You have the last report, the comprehensive.
Comprehensive financial report. I'm glad I can't get in y'all's minds because I'd get lost in there, so.
Okay, it's a pleasure delivering the comprehensive annual financial report of the city. It is about 100 pages long, but I'll take Mr. Schatzel's lead and try to talk about 7 or 8 of important ones. So on page 1 and 2 is the audit opinion. It states that it's a complete audit of the city conducted in accordance with applicable auditing standards that include the financial auditing standards and the government auditing standards. So there's 2 levels of required audit procedures. In an audit, what you seek is a clean, unmodified opinion that states that the financial statements are an accurate reflection of how the city stood at the end of the fiscal year, what transpired financially during the year. You have that highest level of assurance, which is a good reflection on the quality of the financial records and practices of the city. I'm going straight to the pertinent financial statements. On page 24, the city as a unit of government operates under fund accounting, 2 types of funds, the governmental funds and enterprise funds. So this is the balance sheet of the governmental funds. Governmental funds are the general fund, which is your main operating fund, the CRA fund, and the capital improvement fund. The total assets of these funds at the end of the year were $3,985,285. Total liabilities, $826,304. Fund balances toward the bottom are cash reserves. The total is $3,127,057. If you look 2 numbers up, the unassigned, which is basically the general fund balance, $1,119,427. And you had some discussion. It represents about 3 months of general fund expenditure, so that's good. You're moving up into the 3. It's good to move on up, but it's better. It's an increase from last year. Okay, the next statement on page 26 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. For these funds, if you look at the total governmental fund column, the total revenues were $5,317,211. Total expenditures were $5,210,706. There were some transfers in and out and other items, but 3 numbers up from the bottom. In this year, for these funds as a whole, you increased fund balance by $115,915. And kind of, if you compare it, if you look at the prior year number, in the prior year, you overexpended these funds by $517,850. So in this 1 year, it was a turnaround of $634,000. So while that
Would you consider that
115 is
good?
very, yes, that's good. 115,000 is almost break even at those numbers, but it sure beats losing 600,000, 500,000.
Sure, it's a sharp stick in the eye, I understand.
Yeah. Okay, the next statement I'll look at on page 28 is the balance sheet of the enterprise funds. You have two enterprise funds. One's the water and sewer and the stormwater. Enterprise funds operate under business accounting principles, so the balance sheet's called the statement of net position. The intent of an enterprise fund is to operate off user charges so that you're not having to utilize your general revenues for these operations. Okay, the total assets at the end of the year were $12,667,306. Kind of compare it to the prior year, that's an increase of $374,000. The total liabilities are $3,576,546. So the net position toward the bottom, that's your net worth kind of. The total is $12,667,306. The largest amount is your investment in capital assets, $8.1 million. But the net position's $9,004,197. I think I picked up the wrong number. But if you look up at the unrestricted net position, is $861,979. It again is about 3 months of the enterprise fund expenditure, so it also is increasing. And it shows an increase from the prior year. If you look at the prior year, it was $475,000. At this point, it's $861,000. So that's an increase of $386,000 in this
Thank you
one.
very much.
Okay. The next statement on page 29 is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. Again, the intent of these funds are to operate off of user charges. So your operating revenues were $3,375,361, and that's the total column. The expenses were operating expenses $3,072,798. So you had operating income of $302,563. You had some interest expenses, so the bottom line was positive $134,648. And again, while that looks like not a high number, that includes covering all of your depreciation for the year that was $500,581. So in this year, you operated, you funded your depreciation for the year, and you still added to your reserves about $115,000. So,
Wow.
So it again, to me, that's a successful year.
Now,
Yes, sir.
When you
That,
can do
if you were gonna tell my mother this,
Again, I don't have authority over.
25 words or less, how would you say we're doing?
Okay, I'd say that you're, I've heard that, you're incrementally increasing your reserves. You're living within your resources, and you're incrementally increasing your reserves.
And previously, we were incrementally increasing our
Debt.
debt. Good.
Okay, if you go to page 42, there's a table of your capital assets. Capital assets are your fixed assets, again arranged. This first table is governmental activities. The total assets at cost are $13,813,667. Accumulated depreciation $5,628,121. Net assets $8.2 million. These assets are about 40% depreciated, and so I would say that these assets are about average for the cities that I'm aware of your size. There's some that are worse, some that are a little better. And then the equivalent table on page 43 for the enterprise fund. The assets at cost are $19,028,374, so you have a substantial investment in your capital assets. Accumulated depreciation $8,336,968. Net assets $10,691,406. These assets are about 44% appreciated, so you're still kind of in the same ballpark. You're probably kind of average. These might be a little bit older than other ones, but you're not in terrible shape. The next page, on page 44, is some information on the debt of the city. Or actually at the bottom of 43, bottom of 43, note G. Okay, in this year, you had refinanced a bond issue. You refunded and advanced it. So, and the amount was $615,000 in the general fund and $2.6 million in the enterprise fund. And the result of that refunding, you saved the city about $300,000 just by doing that. So
Saved.
So whoever's idea that was a good idea.
Yeah.
I remember that.
$318,598.
That was your good job.
And the woman sitting right over there, Aaron.
Which one of the women?
Aaron.
Aaron? No raise, but good job.
So, okay, so is that,
She'll work her
okay.
own raise out.
So the debt at the end of the year for each of your two areas was lower than at the beginning of the year, so you reduced debt besides you getting the gain from the refinancing. So I would say financially you had a successful year. Exactly, I would restate what I said. You lived within your resources, you incrementally increased your reserves, you reduced your debt. Those are always good points to an auditor. Okay, on page 89 and 90 is our report regarding our audit procedures required by government auditing standards. These procedures go beyond financial issues that include internal control over financial reporting, compliance with various laws, regulations, policies of the city. This report has no findings or question costs. Page 91, 92 is the management letter required by rules of the Auditor General of Florida. This report addresses specific areas, also contains findings, recommendations that are not significant material to the financial statements, but areas with which we wish to make you aware. We look at the status of prior year findings and then any new findings. In the prior year, you had a finding relating to red light camera traffic fines that was corrected during the current year. There were no reportable findings in the current year. The annual report that's filed electronically with the state of Florida as required by Florida statutes is in agreement with the audit. We determined that the city had not met any of the conditions regarding a financial emergency as specified in Florida statutes. We did financial condition assessment procedures. I've given you the highlights of those. We noted no deteriorating financial conditions, did not disclose any other areas required by rules of the Auditor General. Page 93, we're required to do audit procedures regarding the city's investment of public funds. We had no findings with that. So that was kind of
We came out A+. I appreciate the brevity.
Thank you.
Would, any questions from the council?
So you don't see any problems at all?
The auditors don't say you don't see any problems at all. My goodness.
There's problems, you know.
You're like a pathologist, you know everything after. Jim, good job. Vince, good job. Staff, good job. Aaron. I think we're on the upward pattern, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure working
Motion
with
to
you.
adjourn, you need the CRA meeting next.
Okay, we are at,
Motion to adjourn so you can start.
Adjourn?
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done. 10-minute break. All right.